Hello, anybody that has joined so far. My name is Brian Riesen. I'm a Senior Application Consultant here at Zobrio for Financial Edge. I'm going to give about another 1 minute for anybody else to dial in and connect to the meeting. So I'm going to have everybody unmute, and you won't hear from me until another 1 minute from now when I'll begin the presentation. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody. It looks like it's about time to start according to my watch. My name is Brian Riesen, and I am a Senior Application Consultant for Financial Edge here at Zobrio. And welcome to Zobrio University today. The topic of choice is an overview of Financial Edge budget scenarios. If this is not what you're hoping to see, you're welcome to stay, but it may not be what you want to see then. But this is a topic I feel that I've gotten some questions on, so I wanted to give a little presentation to give a nice high-level overview of how budget scenarios work in Financial Edge. Everybody should hopefully be joined by phone right now. The lines will be muted. I'll have contact information at the end that you can follow up with any questions afterwards. But given the limited amount of time, I'd like to hold those questions until after. So for today, what we're going to do is take a look at Financial Edge budget management, what it is, look at how we access budgets and how to add budget scenarios, take a look at the budget tools available with that, and the budget reports that we use to view the information at the end. First off, a question I get sometimes is, how do we know if budget scenarios are available to us, or if budget management is a module that's installed in Financial Edge? It's easy to find out. If you go into General Ledger and Records section, you will see budgets available if you have budget management installed. If you don't see budgets, then it's not installed. If you believe you should have it installed, then you can always contact us and we can get that in there for you. If you don't have it and you don't think you should have it but would like it, we can definitely get you in touch with some people as well to see about getting that added to your system. Now, budget management, this allows us to develop, copy, forecast, and monitor or report on multiple budgets over multiple years or periods. The budget scenarios are used to create those multiple versions of budgets for any given fiscal year. So for example, you may wish to keep a budget draft, an original budget, a revised, a final budget, or you can use multiple forecasting scenarios. Some people say, forecast 1, 2, or 3. And this allows us to create what-if scenarios for analyzing the budgets. There are some business rules in Financial Edge. If you're familiar with Financial Edge already, then you will know about some business rule settings. In the General Ledger side, there are just some rules that if you have the projects and grants modules as well, in budget management, whenever you adjust or increase or decrease the budget, there's some options to decide what you want to do there. On the accounts payable side of things, you can use a budget scenario to check for over budget expenditures and decide what you want to do. You can allow it, don't allow it, or warn you. For example, I've seen people use this and recommended that they want a warning when they hit 85% of budget so that accounts payable doesn't do anything, or at least pop up a message. So we would copy a final budget and make it 85% of the final budget and use that scenario for our budget checking. And you'll see how that works about copying later on when I get into the budget tools. Now, in order to create budget scenarios, the first thing we must do is create the scenario IDs. This is done in General Ledger Configuration in the Table section. If you highlight tables or go into tables, and on the left-hand side is a list of all your tables, there's one called Scenario ID. If you highlight that, if you're not using scenarios currently, it'll be blank, but if you are, you'll see a list of all the budget scenarios that you may have. For example, in this sample data, we have ones for the planned budget, the final budget, different operating and admin budgets, and period ranges for the period budgets. So once we have these scenario IDs, these are what you want to kind of plan out ahead of time to say, well, what kind of budget scenarios do I want to track or monitor or create? And you can add more later if you want to, and you don't have to use all of them that are in here. But once you have those in the system, you will see when it asks you create one, you'll say the short description and a long description. And in the records budget section, those scenario IDs and descriptions will appear in the first two columns that we look at. So you want to make sure these are something that makes sense to you when you add them. Now, once we have the scenario IDs ready, we can go into accessing budget records. That is done through records budgets, which we said is available if we have budget management installed. And once we look at it, you'll see I have a list here of some sample budgets. The screen is a nice grid view. You can pick your annual budget or your budgets, your period range budgets. You can filter with the drop down for your fiscal years. So say you only want to see this current years or maybe look at the past years, or you can filter the scenario IDs. So if you have multiple scenario IDs, you can choose which ones you want to look at. This is also where you create new ones, open existing ones. You can delete old ones, print them, export them, and there's a find button. Once you get a bunch of scenarios in there, you can click find to search for one if you've got a specific one you can't find. Now, if we highlight a budget scenario and click open or double click on it, it will pop up the window you see on the right. There's certain things in here that you want to identify. For example, if there's a little lock icon, the budget is locked or finalized. This means you cannot make adjustments or you cannot change the budget without making an adjustment. And that allows you, I'll talk about that near the end as well, but you can track the original budget plus the adjustments and then a final adjusted budget number. If you have a bunch of accounts, which most of you will have a lot of accounts in here, you don't have to have every account, but if you want to find a specific account to see what that budget is, if you're working partway through it, for example, or you want to go back and look at what you did earlier in the year, there's a find feature where you can search for different fields, perhaps account number, find that account number. There's also a filters button available, like so many other screens in Financial Edge, that allow you to filter by accounts, funds, different account segments you may have, like office or department. And that'll narrow your grid view down. On the screen as well, there's a little icon in the toolbar for annotations, and there's also a notes option. The paper with the pin in it on the toolbar is an annotation. That is going to be for the entire budget grid. So this is for the budget scenario for that year. This note is tied to that. So you may want to track some sort of comment about this budget scenario, like this is a draft from Bill, or this is the final resolution approved for the municipalities. And you can also mark the checkbox at the bottom of the annotation screen to display it automatically. So when somebody, either yourself or somebody else, opens this budget scenario, you will see this pop-up window, the screen that you're seeing here. So whatever note you added, somebody will see that, and they have to go ahead and close that in order to get to the grid screen. Now, notes are available per account and per row within the budget scenario. So if you highlight a row, in the menu bar, you can click budget on the toolbar and then note, and you can add a note for that specific account. So if there may be a comment about the budget for that one account, for example. Now, budgets have different views. You can view them by project, account, budget, or grant. This is the budget option. This is the one we most are familiar with and the one we use most often. So that's pretty much what I'm going to be covering today. Not everybody uses the projects or grants, and they usually don't use the account view too much. So I won't be covering that, but you're welcome to go in there and play with it. And this is how you switch on the toolbar between the views. Now, in order to add a budget, if you're on the records budget screen, you click New Budget, and then you select the scenario ID. So those are the IDs we entered in the table. So you click a drop down, and that's how they become available. It pulls the description from that table. And you want to pick your budget type. Typically, I see fiscal year, but you can do period range, which allows you to cross fiscal years if that's how you want to do it. For example, maybe calendar year as opposed to your fiscal year. And if you choose the fiscal year, it's going to ask you the start year, and the rest of the options will be grayed out because it won't let you change the year definition in here. It pulls it from the system. And you can change your views just like those 4 views I covered. It defaults to the budget view because that's the one we use most frequently, but you can change it here if you want to load the screen into a different view automatically. And when you choose these options, you just click Load Now. And that takes us to the grid screen that we've seen snapshots for already. Yours will be blank when you first start. There are options. You can either start going in and entering line by line. You can, there is a toolbar next to the Annotate. There is a Load Accounts button here, and that Load Accounts can let you filter by a fund, account segments, etc. You're probably familiar on the reports and other areas on filtering within Financial Edge. This is very similar to all those. And you can load certain accounts. So maybe you only want to load your operating fund account. So you'd load Fund 1, but all your other ones aren't in there. Or maybe just a department budget is what you're working on. So you could load your account segment for budgets or for whatever department you're looking for. As you populate the screen, you have a total column, and that's the total budget for the year, if we're doing a fiscal year budget. And all your periods will be listed out here, and there's a scroll bar at the very bottom of the screen that you use to scroll through all your periods. And you'll see, this is fiscal year 2011, period 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can either put things in the first period. So for example, this is showing a front-loaded budget is what I would call that. This is your annual budget. So everybody might in this example, it would be loading the budget in period 1, and you just eat away at that budget for the rest of the year. Some people distribute it evenly across all 12 periods. So if you want to do that, there's actually a handy button. You can just enter your total and then click Distribute Total here. And it'll ask you if you want to do it by percent or amount, and it automatically populates the remaining columns accordingly. You can even add budget distributions and save those. So you might want to load a budget distribution where maybe you enter your budgets are available on the first month of any given quarter. So your periods 1, 4, 7, and 10 would have 25% of distribution. So then you would load that budget distribution. It would populate columns 1 and 4 with it, 1/4 of whatever your total is. Now, once we get all the budget information in here, where does that information go? Yes, we can see it here, and we can report on it. But the important part is if somebody's opening an account, there's a budget tab, and you can pick between scenario IDs. So if you have a draft budget and a final budget, you can drop that down, look at your fiscal years, and it'll load all your periods and what the budgets are accordingly here. And it pulls this information from the scenario. So that's why it's grayed out, but it's displayed there for you. Another option on the original budget screen here is when you load it and it's blank, there are importing options. So if some people have an Excel file that they like to import with, maybe a lot of people I know use budgets in Excel and pass it around their departments, or they compile them from other smaller Excel files, and that's the way they do it, and that's the way they like to do it, and that's fine. You can use a budget import, and that's done through administration import, and there's a budget section in there. I'm not going to cover importing right today because that is a topic that would take more than the 20 minutes I have. But if you would like to learn more about that, you can use my contact info at the end of this presentation here, and I can get you that additional information. Now, once we have our budgets all in place, there are budget tools that are available to us. We can access these if you're on the Records Budgets screen at the Financial Edge main page. You can pick the Tools menu and then select Budget Tools. Or if you're actually within the Budget Scenario grid, you can choose Budget from the top menu and then Budget Tools. And this is the top of the screen you'll see listing all of our budget options for us. The first few revolve around increasing or decreasing the budget. Now, this is to increase or adjust or decrease whatever you have in an existing budget scenario. So it will update what is in that grid. Yeah, so whatever old data was there is not going to be there anymore. And if we choose to do that, it'll ask us to pick the scenario ID, the fiscal year, and the period or total amounts that we want to use, or the percent or amount that we want to adjust it by. And that depends on whatever you're trying to do. Now, the other option, the next option on the row, is to copy or forecast a budget. We can copy either budgets from a previous year or actual amounts from one budget into another. So you may perhaps create a new budget scenario that's a final budget, or maybe a draft budget, copying it off of last year's actuals. So if we look at the screens when we choose that option, we can copy budgeted or actual amounts from one budget to another. It asks us to pick the source scenario and our destination scenario in the years, and what do you want to copy. You can copy the budget, and this is where you would pick the budget or actuals and the period that you're trying to copy, and you can copy the amounts or percentages. And once we do that, it will click next, and you can say copy or forecast now. Another option on our budget tools is to merge scenarios. What this does is it'll combine two or more budget scenarios to create a new one. For example, you may have multiple offices or departments that each do their own individual budgets, and you want to have their own individual scenarios tracked, so you can say, all right, well, here's my budget scenario for my administrative office, and here's all the other ones. But I would like to maintain as well a master budget for our entire organization, so you can go in here and do that. And what you do is when you pick this option, you can include these fiscal year budgets, so you start with that year. If you have individual scenarios you want to combine, you pick them on drop downs, or you can click merge all, and it'll load them all into this window here. That'll pick all the budgets for that year, the scenarios that you want to combine. And you can pick these period range budgets if you have some of those as well. And when you click next, it's going to ask you where do you want to save all this merged information. So you would pick your target scenario, and the fiscal year is going to be the same as the source fiscal years. If you have a target you've already created, maybe there's some data in there, but you're like, you know what, I don't want that. I want to just merge these into that. You can check this box to overwrite your existing scenario, but use that carefully. It defaults to unchecked because it will overwrite anything that's already in there. Deleting a scenario. Now, this is one of your budget tools. I don't recommend using it unless you are intentionally doing so, because it will remove all instances of that scenario for all fiscal years. So not just one fiscal year scenario, every year. So for example, if you have a draft scenario ID and you choose to delete that, it will take it across all years that you've ever had the draft scenario ID. So it is available, but use it with extreme caution. Finalizing a scenario, this is the last and final option, and this locks the budget period amounts for that scenario. You can only make changes through a budget adjustment. So in other words, it finalizes that budget as the original budget, and any changes will be considered adjustments. And that's handy because sometimes, you know, there's changes to the budget throughout the year, but you want to make sure you keep your original one in place. If you choose not to finalize a scenario, which you don't have to do, whenever you close a fiscal year in Financial Edge, it automatically finalizes the budget scenarios for that year during the close process. Now, if we want to adjust a finalized budget, we finalize the budget for a year, and you go into a budget, you can either choose to do the amounts or the totals for a period or a total amount of the budget. And when you do, you simply go in the grid and enter that new amount. And when you go to save the budget scenario this time, rather than just saving and closing and saying, hey, okay, it's saved, it'll ask you to enter a reason for the adjustment. So you cannot modify or adjust a finalized budget scenario without adding a reason. And this prompts you automatically to do so. Now, once we have the budgets in place, in the grid, if you choose File and Print, it will print us a budget distribution report, which is a list of the fiscal years and the budgets and the ranges that we just entered in that grid. some other places that budgets show up. An income statement, when you're defining your columns on an income statement, when you're looking at the formulas, you will see actuals. If you have encumbrances enabled, you will see those, but you'll see options for original, adjusted, and budget adjustments. The original budget is obvious, that's the budget you have. The adjusted budget would be the final adjustment amount, and the budget adjustments are the individual adjustments. So let's say we have an original budget of $1. We want to add 1,000 to it, so we've added a budget adjustment of $1,000. The original budget will show 1, the adjusted budget would show 1,001, and the budget adjustments would show the 1,000 amount. And if we go into reports in General Ledger, we'll see the three budget reports available to us. The first is the budget adjustment journal, which will list your adjustments for a period that you select, and it can include the adjustment dates and who made those adjustments. That's handy to have. The budget adjustments report lists the budgets with the original, any adjustments, and the final budgets. So the first one's got more details. The budget adjustments report is more of the higher view that you may need to pass up through the ranks. And last but not least is the budget distribution report, which is the same thing we saw on that first screen. It just simply uses these parameters here, and it can include budgets, account notes, percentages, and accounts even with 0 budgets if you want to list those. And I believe I've hit my 20-minute mark today, actually, pretty perfectly almost, if I do say so myself. So I would like to thank you for listening into Zobrio University today. And if you have any questions, as promised, I have my contact information here. Please email me at brian.riesen@zobrio.com. If you want a copy of the slides, you can email me as well, and I will provide you a nice copy of these slides. So thank you, everybody, for your time today, and have a great weekend.